Good afternoon. We were on page 3, I think, of your inquiry report, paragraph 111, if you wouldn't mind. I understand the last sentence. Rather, the identified landscape and visual effects should be considered as part of a wider planning exercise which has full regard to the benefits of the proposals. Does that mean that the planning balance has to take into account your conclusions and may therefore depend upon them?
Well, the planning balance will take forward the identified effects, both beneficial and harmful, both landscape and visual, and across the board in other regards. So, yes, it takes those matters into account.
And might depend upon it.
Well, you can't undertake the planning balance without having the information on what all the effects are.
But the difficulty is for us to see, Mr. Denny, that you reached a set of conclusions on landscape and visual impact, both individually and cumulatively, which are completely at variance with those of my client and the council. Now, the reporter has to reach a view. How's he to do that on the landscape and visual effects of this proposal on its own, and then take it in cumula with the others?
Well, he'll do that using his professional judgment in the way I'm sure that he has always done. And if, for example, he disagreed with me where I have said, I think, or the LBIA and I have said that an effect is not significant and the reporter feels that it is significant, then when he looks at the planning balance, he will see whether that planning balance for him still works with the addition of the significant effect that he has identified.
Right. I think I understand that. Just going back a couple of paragraphs, 1.9. You put in brackets in the second and third last line, considering the right to roam within Scotland. So you're talking about here viewpoint locations, identified core paths, other locations, bracket, considering the right to roam within Scotland. What did you mean by that?
Well, normally, if I'm working on a proposal in England, then all of the viewpoints would be regarded to be from publicly accessible viewpoints. And in England, that will be limited to public footpaths or maybe open access land, but it wouldn't be to open areas of moorland for which there weren't access agreements. In Scotland, you may well have that ability to go to places which are not on public rights-of-way, public footpaths, or have specific access agreements with the right to roam. So it might be pertinent to understand that you might be able to take into consideration viewpoints from those locations.
When we look at this parenthesis, considering the right to roam within Scotland, what are we actually to take from that? That you can see or you can postulate a viewpoint from anywhere?
Well, what it's basically saying is I understand that in choosing the viewpoints and choosing what would be the representative viewpoints, you need to take that into consideration. What actually happened in this case was the viewpoints were chosen by a process between the consultees and the council and the applicant, and a range of viewpoints which were considered to be the most pertinent and the most representative were chosen.
As happens in every case.
As happens in every case.
But in Scotland, those viewpoints might be on private land, might they not?
They might. That's the point of my making it. I'm saying I understand that position.
I'm not criticising you, I'm just trying to understand what you meant here. In 112, you say, having regard to the relevant policy context relating to landscape and visual matters. And then you go over the page. What did you mean by the relevant policy context?
Well, I always, when I'm carrying out any landscape and visual work and preparing evidence, even though it may not be my job to make the planning balance or indeed to decide whether each of the policy tests are met, I at least want to have an understanding of what policy is saying, and so I'll read the landscape policies.
Are you, as you say, having regard to here?
Those landscape policies which are contained within the Murray Development Plan.
Does that reflect your evidence at 2.9, where I think you're saying that notwithstanding SNH's 2019 work, you've essentially predicated your conclusions upon the Murray Wind Energy Landscape Capacity Study?
Well, certainly that, I think, is the, for me, in terms of landscape and visual guidance, that is one of the more pertinent documents because it deals significantly and specifically with the landscape and the landscape relative sensitivity.
It's quite important for me to know whether you've considered it alone as the policy matrix for this decision. You call it the focus here in the last line, or whether you've injected into your thinking some of SNH's conclusions, which may not exactly chime with what Murray Council come to.
I've certainly considered SNH's conclusions, and I take all of the consultees' opinions into regard.
Sorry to press you, but that isn't consistent with this paragraph. You say in the middle of the paragraph, as such, the 2019 SNH assessments are not referenced further within this report. Now, that's not quite the same as saying, I haven't taken them into account. You say they're not referenced further, which...
No, in that regard, I have actually used the Murray document. So I thought you, when you were saying the opinions of SNH, I thought you meant SNH's consultation ones.
No, I didn't.
No, sorry, that's where the confusion lay.
We can move on a little more rapidly, I think. Yeah, this is maybe as good a place as any. Well, no, perhaps not. I've got one question about 411 and 412, please, in your inquiry report. Here, in this chapter, you're talking about Roy's Hill as a landmark hill. I'm not going to quarrel with you about that or about your conclusions, but I just need to understand these two paragraphs a little better. In 411, in the fourth line, you talk about detracting from its distinctive form and character. Can I understand, therefore, that you accept that it has a distinctive form and character?
I'm assessing against detracting from its distinctive form and character because that's actually taken from the capacity study document in what it says about Roy's Hill. So because it's what the document says, I'm going to address it. That's what it's telling me.
With respect, that wasn't my question. Are you accepting that it has a distinctive form and character?
Well, no, I've set out clearly that I think that the distinctive form and character of it is not set as, I do not set it as high as the capacity study does. But notwithstanding that, I have addressed all of the points raised in the capacity study, and that's a direct quotation from the capacity study. I know that it's a direct quotation from the
Capacity study. What I asked you was whether you accept, whether or not you accept it as a landmark, do you accept that Roy's Hill has a distinctive form and character?
I don't think it is a particularly distinctive form. For example, there are two hills just to the east of Ben Rins here, which, in my opinion, are not landmark hills, have a more distinctive form and character than Roy's Hill. It has clearly, it's a hill, and in close proximity, it has the character that it has. But the degree to which it is distinctive, the degree to which its form acts as a landmark in the wider landscape, I've set out in some detail in my evidence.
I'm not sure that you're answering my question, but I'll just leave it. The 412 is set in italics, and therefore I think it's a quotation, presumably from the Murray Wind Energy Landscape Character Study, is it?
It is, yes.
It's a short chapter 7, dealing with the Council's third reason for refusal. First 7.4. While it is suggested that the proposed turbines are located closer to the edge of the upland, there are in fact few areas where the proposed turbines would be seen, where the existing turbines would not already be visible. It was your use of the term few areas. How few or how many?
Well, I can't quantify it because it's not about viewpoint locations. It's about localities.
Well, is it significant in the number of localities that the turbines are seen where the existing turbines would not already be visible?
Well, they are in close proximity to, for example, one of those would be called Glass. So in that Upper Knockando area, close to Corglass and Glenarder, then there are locations within the landscape from which the existing Paul's Hill is not visible. But in the majority of the places from which the turbines of Paul's Hill 2 would be visible, Paul's Hill 1 would also be visible.
You say collectively both the existing and proposed schemes would have a relatively limited extent of significant effect on either visual amenity or landscape character. Of what? It's a loose sentence. It's just flying about on its own.
Visual amenity is in relation to impact on views, and landscape character is in relation to impact on the attributes of local landscape character.
I know what they are. To what locality or area does this sentence relate? It just seems to sit on its own.
Well, because it's a summation of the LVIA. The LVIA sets out where the character effects are, significant and otherwise, and the LVIA sets out where the significant visual effects are. And they are limited. Indeed, the LVIA only has viewpoint 1 from Tomore as a significant effect.
So this is not Brian Denny speaking. This is the LVIA speaking.
No, I'm taking my view both from my analysis of the LVIA, which I appraised on my appointment to this project, and then going around myself extensively in the landscape to see whether I agreed with its findings or not. And as I think I said earlier, if there was somewhere where I had not agreed with its findings, I would have said so. And therefore, interpreting its findings is still my own opinion because I've assessed that I agree with those findings.
In the last paragraph, 7.7, proposed turbines be designed to relate well to the existing Paul's Hill turbines, and whilst taller are not of such difference in height that the two schemes would appear to be inappropriate. There's the double negative again, not inappropriate, alongside one another in the landscape. Now, if my understanding is correct, Paul's Hill 1 are 100 metres, is that right?
Yes.
And we're proposing here 6 of 149.9 metres, just under 150 metres, so 50% increase in height.
And a turbine at 134.
And one
Indeed,
at 134.
It helps you in this regard because we're back onto exactly the same point that you asked me earlier. So if you'll note in the, I have it at 13.5 of the introduction to the ES, where it summarises the scheme design.
Yep.
And it tells you that point there, as we discussed earlier, about turbine 6. And it says 6 turbines up to 149.9, 1 turbine, turbine 6, up to a blade height of 134. And it's actually, as we discussed, it's a two-pronged reason for it, owing to its elevated ground level, and the design considered the skyline views, particularly from the Spey Valley and viewpoint 1, in coming to the judgment as to the reduction in that turbine. So it comes back.
So when you say relate well, those are the two criteria you're applying. Higher ground and relating well to the Spey Valley.
No, sorry, I was just iterating the point about why turbine 6 was reduced to 134. In carrying out the iterative design of a wind farm, there are multifaceted things that one takes into account, and it's not just one or two things, as you're putting to me.
You use the expression relate well to the existing turbines.
Yes.
In the proposal before us, 3 turbines are just lower than the summit of Roy's Hill. 4 are greater in height than the summit of Roy's Hill. In the old scheme, 9 are lower and 19 are above. What I want to try and understand and help the reporter to understand is what you mean by relate well. There are quite big disparities here. And I need to understand your evidence so that I can make submissions on it.
I consider that they relate well because I've looked at the Paul's Hill turbines and the proposed extension turbines, from all of the viewpoints within the landscape, not just those within the LVIA, but from the landscape as a whole, as I have assessed it, and in relation to the way in which you perceive or see, or would see, the turbines of Paul's Hill with the extension turbines, to come to a view as to whether I think they do relate well or not, taking into account the matters that you and I have discussed.
What does relate well mean?
Well, appear well in the landscape such that there appears to be, first of all, they appear as a single wind farm, not as two distant wind farms, that there aren't any outliers, there aren't any turbines that appear to be disconnected or disjointed or jarring, that appropriate stacking or blade clash from important viewpoints has been taken into consideration, that relative tip heights between the turbines doesn't give rise to any uncomfortable visual effects when looked at from viewpoints. One also has to take into account when designing a wind farm that because you can't make it look perfect in every direction, as we know, then relating well means that from those places which are most important, you've taken into consideration to do the best you can from those locations, even if that might lead, for example, to some stacking or blade clash from a less sensitive viewpoint. All of these things and many more are taken into account at the time that a design iteration takes place.
Matters of professional judgment.
And they all have to be matters of professional judgment. Yes, they do. And that's why it's important when you're designing a wind farm to have people who are experienced in doing it, so that you can get as good a scheme as can be achieved.
Okay. Let's look at Chapter 8 now, can we? Please. The one with which my clients are most concerned. At 8.4, you cite the Windy Edge decision, CD 910, in relation to the question of whether or not the turbines will make Cordglass an unattractive place to live. I think it's right that at Windy Edge on the Scottish border, there are very few residences within close proximity of the proposed wind farm. Is that not right?
The original Windy Edge, that's true. Yes.
Yeah.
I think what I'm quoting that particularly is the set-in train, the test, which in Scotland now has been adopted. It was slightly different language in Scotland at one point, but what we in England call the lavender test, and the language of the lavender test has come into Scotland. And Windy Edge was one of those decisions in which that appropriate language and the test that reporters are making came into play.
But it's only appropriate, Mr. Denny, I would suggest to you, if the surrounding context is more or less congruent, such as, for example, the application of the so-called test in Caithness, where there'd be one or two examples.
Well, no, unless I've misunderstood you, I disagree with you. The test as to whether the turbines in relation to their impact on living conditions and residential amenity are acceptable or not is the same in all regards. It is a judgment that has to be made on the impact of turbines on living conditions.
David Lavender in CD 9.34, you don't need to get it out, said, when turbines are present in such number, size and proximity that they represent an unpleasantly overwhelming and unavoidable presence in main views from a house or garden, there is every likelihood that the property would come to be widely regarded as an unattractive and thus unsatisfactory, but not necessarily uninhabitable place in which to live. I'm sure you're well familiar with that.
I'm very familiar with it. I gave the evidence of the Burnt House inquiry, in which I brought together all of the thinking of Inspector Griffiths, Inspector Baird, Inspector Jackson and Inspector Lavender, brought all of that into play in the residential community study and had that sanctioned by the Secretary of State.
Well, thank you for that additional editorial.
Yes, I'm very familiar.
I read the evidence. I know you're very familiar with it. I think we've talked about it before in inquiries. Yes. At Cordglass, as you approach it, and without the strip of trees, you'll see 5 turbines where today there are none. Isn't that right?
Yes, you will.
And also from the holiday cottage.
You will see the turbines. You can see what you can see from the holiday cottage on the visualizations.
And also from the upper floors of the house.
I haven't been into the upper floors of the house, but that assessment has been made in the LVI as to what the degree of assessment is. And the reporter, of course, has been and seen for himself those views. So
it comes down to a judgment, doesn't it, about number, size and proximity, which are David Lavender's words or David Lavender's criteria for this so-called test.
Well, that certainly is the language that he used. That it later evolved into deciding, and it's a phrase that's come into parliaments in Scotland now, as to whether the turbines would be overwhelming or overbearing, was the language that eventually flowed from that.
Well, I think that was the language of a refusal, wasn't it, in Caithness, Mr. Croft's
Well,
language?
in terms of when it was first said in Scotland, that's right.
Yeah. The addition of 5 turbines at Corglass of a certain size and proximity, which we can refer to the documents to check out for ourselves, do certainly change the ambience, don't they, of that dwelling.
Yes, there's a significant visual effect. Again, that's clearly set out.
Now, can I put this to you? As well as being a place to live, Corglass is a place where people work and from where they derive a living. And they derive that living by having guests there, visitors, who are there for a certain purpose. Does that make a difference, do you think, to the application of the test? Does it not sharpen, as it were, the criteria which are set for, or set in this notional test, for acceptability?
No, I don't think we should mix the two things together. The test on residential amenity is what it says. It's a test on residential amenity and living conditions. It's a test on residential amenity and living conditions at a property. The impact that a significant visual effect may or may not have on somebody visiting or somebody coming there for sporting activity is separate from the residential amenity test.
That's a semantic distinction, isn't it? It's all about appreciation of the ambience of the location where you are going.
No, I think it would be very dangerous if we started to take that into account directly into the residential amenity test. It is certainly something that needs to be taken into consideration. I agree with you. The use of a property and the function of a property will be material, but I don't think we should actually blur the test on living conditions with what somebody visiting to come archery, playing or doing some other function there, and the impact on them. It's not their residential amenity that's being affected. You may wish to argue that their enjoyment may in some way be impaired, but that's a completely different matter.
It's not a completely different matter, is it? It's a different matter. You might consider them sequentially and reach different views about each of them, but they're both cognate with each other, aren't they, in the sense that they're about impression of the location. One for the people who live there, one for the people who visit.
I don't think that's a point for me as a landscape architect, and it's certainly not part of the evidence that I give.
Well, the residential impact seems to be part of your evidence.
It is, yes.
Why is it not legitimate to suggest that it should be part of your evidence, that there will be an impact upon visitors who come there for recreational purposes?
Well, they will experience a significant visual effect in terms of the effect as set out in the LVIA. Those visual effects, i.e. the effects on visual amenity, have been assessed. And I think what you're blurring distinction between is the impact on visual amenity with the residential amenity test.
Well, I think that's a matter for submissions. Now, at 8.13, you are identifying a moderate overall magnitude of visual change as a result of new additions. The assessed visual effect is found to be moderate, major, and significant. You stick to that conclusion, moderate, major, and significant?
Yes.
Not higher than that?
No, I mean, at the distance, with the number of turbines, the relationship they are with the property, the partial screening that the property enjoys, and the distance from the turbines, I think that's a fair and appropriate judgment.
And you don't see elements of dominance or domination in what is proposed as far as Corglass is concerned?
No, I mean, I have worked on schemes and seen turbines with a much greater effect on a residential property be considered to be acceptable in terms of the residential amenity test, which would have a greater degree of dominance than these do. Mm-hmm. No, I don't think that these turbines are dominant in that way, which is why I'm able to say they're not overwhelming or overbearing. But they do have an impact on the view in the way that's been described.
Even although this is an isolated property at the end of a road, which is hitherto can't see a single turbine, except some at 23 kilometres.
I would take that into account for every property, whatever its context was. I'm certainly not going to decide that a terraced house on the edge of a village doesn't have the same rights to residential amenity because it's a terraced house on the edge of the village. I would apply the same test in the same way.
At 8.18, you say the assessed visual effect is found to be major and significant, yet even were the screen vegetation to be felled, it's not so prominent, dominant, or extensive that the main property would be dominated by the proposed development. You understand, of course, that my clients profoundly disagree with that.
Yes, I do.
You understand why they would think that they are about to experience dominant wind turbines, having lived for however long it is, with Paul's Hill 1 present but out of sight.
Yeah, yes, I fully understand that. I mean, I've been at pains to say, and I hope Mr. and Mrs. Bonzio appreciate this, that I'm here not to give a subjective or a personal opinion. I'm here to give a professional opinion within the context of landscape and visual impact assessment. And I know that clearly and often does conflict with the personal opinions of individual residents.
If you don't mind, the last two lines, it's not considered these effects are of a scale or nature. That suggested to me in reading it that you were perhaps applying some sort of scale in your own mind, some sort of index in your own mind. Is that right? Have I understood that correctly?
Yes, looking at the scale of turbines, both in terms of their height, numbers and spread, can be very important to residential amenities study. Indeed, I've worked on schemes where we had what we call a wraparound, where the turbines enclose the property on more than one side, and therefore the scale of the turbines have an increased impact on the residential amenity. You need to take all of these factors into account.
That's going to happen with the cumulative impact if Corglass and if Paul's Hill, Clashgar and Rothes 3 are built, isn't it?
Yes, if Paul's Hill 2 were to be approved and were to be in the baseline, then in carrying out the assessment of cumulative effect on Corglass at a future date in relation to either Clashgar or Rothes or both, would need to take the additional impact of those into account with the now baseline impact of Paul's Hill and Paul's Hill 1 in the landscape.
And there's going to be a substantial element of wraparound, isn't there?
Well, it won't be wraparound in that sense. When I mean wraparound, I meant continuous. But yes, there would be views in more than one direction in which wind turbines had an impact on the residential amenity, and that at that time will be taken into account in the decision making.
All right, well, we'll hear what Mr. Bonzio has to say about that. 9.8, please. The activities carried out at Corglass are adventure and sporting activities not dependent on wildness, tranquility, or with a focus on the landscape. I think you now know that Mr. Bonzio also disagrees with that fairly profoundly. But do you accept his view?
Well, I understand his view. My view differs. I don't think this is not really a landscape point, I suppose, but I don't think that the activities that are carried out at Corglass are such that those matters that I talk about, for example, like tranquility, are an essential part of undertaking those activities. If you're having a corporate day and doing archery and a number of other things, tranquility isn't necessarily part of that. You're chatting with your friends, you're chatting with your colleagues, you're having a laugh about the fact that somebody can't hit the target. It's not a tranquility exercise, is it?
Nine 10. In the second line, you use the word acceptable. We're talking here about the deletion of T1. In what context are you using acceptable?
Acceptable to the report.
Planning balance or landscape impact balance? Visual impact?
In terms of residential amenity.
So again,
in terms of residential amenity.
Very last line of your report.
Have you not bad language?
No, you talk about, I believe the facts stated within this proof of evidence are true and the opinions are correct. Now, of course, I'm not challenging your truthfulness, but Do you make a distinction in your own mind between inquiry report and proof of evidence?
No, I mean, in England I call it proof of evidence, and in Scotland I call it inquiry report.
So this is just a word processing
Well,
issue.
it's actually from the Landscape Institute Code of Conduct. So
It's just that sometimes...
I have a duty.
No, well, sometimes lawyers find a difference between a precognition and a statement, or a precognition and a report. And a proof of evidence is broadly the English equivalent of a precognition. So do you make a distinction in your own mind? That's the question that I am asking you.
No, the evidence in my landscape statement, the evidence in my precognition, and the evidence I've given you today, or as far as I understand it as a professional landscape architect, honest and truthful.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Ms. Mandel, did you have any questions for Mr. Denny?
My questions are going to be a little bit more basic from a layperson. I would like to know or better understand how is it possible to have a moderate to major impact from 5 turbines coming into my view, but no cumulative effect from 33 turbines off approximately 700 feet and nighttime lighting? How is that logically possible?
No, there will be a cumulative effect. I think what you may have misunderstood, and maybe my fault for not communicating it well enough, is that where the impact of Paul's Hill and Paul's Hill 2 have already had a significant effect, if those locations are also the locations from which you would see further turbines at Clashgower, say, or Rothes, or both, you would still have a significant effect. This is the point I think we were talking to the Council there, that the process of cumulative assessment, the language, it doesn't get you to impact plus and impact plus plus. But nonetheless, within the body of the information and the assessment, you can see what the additional effects of those things are. But it still remains that there is a significant effect now, and there will be a significant effect in the future.
I understand that, but from my perspective, if you're looking at something cumulatively, for example, if this is a very simple example, I have a birthday cake with 5 candles on it, there's going to be a certain amount of smoke and light from those 5 candles. If I put 33 candles on that birthday cake, that's going to be increased.
Yes.
It's going to be different.
Yes. The other way that cumulative assessment works, and which people sometimes find difficult, is that if you have your cake with 100 candles on it, and you added 5 more, the percentage impact of those additional 5 over the 100 you already had would not be particularly great, even though the total effect had gone up.
I agree with that, but in this instance, we're putting 5 candles on the cake and then adding 33 more. So that is a significant difference.
I think,
but it's not the other way around.
I understand your point, and I think you probably would have found it easier if maybe, I know you wouldn't agree with it, but let's say just from the point of understanding the position you're making, if from your home the impact of Paul's Hill had not given rise to a significant effect either on local landscape character or visual amenity and views, the cumulative assessment might say, but with the addition of Rothes and Clashgower, there would be a significant effect. I think the confusion lies is because it's already a significant effect, then the additional effect leads to a significant effect. And you have to actually look into the cumulative assessment.
This is just a matter of semantics, though, isn't it? I mean, it's a matter of how you want to look at it.
No, what you need to do is look at the information within the cumulative impact assessment to see what it's telling you about where that additional effect lies in relation to the baseline effect of Paul's Hill. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you're still going to end up, because it's what EIA, I'm afraid, asks you to do, which is to identify the significant effects and where they are. And the language is significant effect. It isn't degrees of significance of effect. You know.
But they use significant and major. That's a degree of difference.
Well, major is a judgment based on the magnitude of change which has been assessed and the sensitivity. That gives you the major or moderate major, and then the ES requires you to say whether that is or isn't significant. Now, some people, and it's not a requirement, some people don't actually even get to the point of saying major or major moderate. They just merely say we have a magnitude of X, we have a sensitivity of Y, and the net result is a significant effect, and that's what environmental impact assessment legislation is asking you to do.
So in the instance that this development is approved, that will immediately set up ROCUS 3 for approval on that
not at all.
logic.
Not at
Well,
all.
maybe not immediately across the board, but it will impact it because then we have 5 turbines or 7 turbines, and then it's easy to argue that, well, they already exist, therefore we're influenced by landscape, by turbines, therefore it's okay to add more because the difference is not significant. And that's just the argument I see coming out, and I see myself, this is a strategic application for ROCUS 3 almost.
I understand your point again there. Yes, you're right. The way that cumulative impact assessment works is that certainly it might say that if we already have a substantial number of turbines in the landscape, the incremental cumulative effect of adding something else, percentage-wise, is not a significant addition. But of course, what I think you're talking about, and I think what Mr. Bonzo is also talking about, is cumulative capacity, which is a slightly different thing. And certainly the decision makers would take into account the cumulative effect of wind farms up to a point where they consider the cumulative capacity and the effect of those multiplicity of wind farms was not acceptable. So it doesn't actually make it more likely. In fact, the more wind farms come into the landscape, it probably makes it less likely because the cumulative capacity at some point will be deemed to be reached by the decision maker on the basis of the effect that is having on the landscape, settlements and local communities.
Okay. When you refer to 8.4 of your report, such a serious visual impact of any property would become widely regarded as unattractive place to live in the sense that the test is commonly applied to wood farms. When you say commonly applied by whom?
Well, now by landscape professionals and by reporters in Scotland and inspectors in England and Wales.
And are residents part of that dialogue?
Well, certainly there's absolutely no reason, as you, Mr. Bonte, have done, why you shouldn't express to the reporter what you think impact on your residential communities and whether you think it's reached a threshold which would make your property an undesirable place in which to live and convey that to them. That's perfectly appropriate.
And how, when you're making an assessment that something is unattractive or undesirable, because that's a very, to every person, something attractive, how do you come to that? How you define unattractive?
Right. Again, that's the language that came from a number of English inspectors who were grappling with how do we explain this thing, because we understand, as I said in my evidence, planning doesn't give you the right to a view, and it doesn't say that your view shouldn't be changed. It doesn't say that your view shouldn't be changed in a way that might be harmful or in some way detrimental to your visual immunity. Because if everybody had the right for their view not to be changed in a detrimental way, it would sterilise all developments in the whole of the United Kingdom. So what reporters and inspectors had to do was grapple with a form of language that said there may be a position at which, even though there's no right to a view, the harm may be so great it would not be in the public interest to diminish the living conditions of this property in that manner. All that's being expressed here is the language they've tried to use to express, and you've got to that point.
But then what gives the applicant the right to take those views if they're not private?
In the sense that a judgment has to be made, and I'm asked to make those judgments and present what my professional judgment is, partly on the basis that I've had to make these judgments on many, many dozens of occasions, and I've also had the salutary experience of those occasions in which my judgment has been soundly agreed with by an inspector or a reporter, and occasions where the reporter has differed from me, and I learn from each of those experiences. I learn from the situations in which things go one way or another and try to improve the manner in which I make those judgments as objectively as I can. That doesn't mean to say that you can't come to a different opinion to me and express that to the reporter, because that's equally legitimate.
And would you acknowledge that a landscape adds an inherent value to a property? That is part of a factor in determining the price and value of a property?
I thought for a moment you weren't going to go to price, because otherwise I was going to agree with you. No, I don't get into the points of property values and how...
No, but regardless of the property value.
The value of the property
you agree it adds a value?
Yes, certainly the setting of a property and its environment clearly add to the value and enjoyment of that property. That's part of the of the assessments that we need to make as to what residential amenity do you enjoy and how might it be impacted upon.
With regard to the views, in your assessment, did you consider public access and tourist value of the Altarda Valley on the level of between Corblast and myself, we bring probably 200-300 guests in over in the year maybe,
Yes,
so that they are enjoying those views.
Yes.
Should that not be protected in any way?
Well, again, their views and their enjoyment of the landscape are covered within the assessment material on the basis, and this is the conversation I was having earlier, on the basis of impact on visual amenity. And that's why I was drawing the distinction between impact on visual amenity, which local residents, tourists, people are going about their normal business within the locality. They will have their visual amenity impacted in a particular way from a particular location. And that's assessed under the visual impact assessment as visual amenity. And then there's your own residential amenity as the owner of Glenarda, and the impact on your living conditions as a separate test.
You presented in your question while you were talking that you couldn't really consider Rockers 3 or Clashdown as part of your assessment because you didn't have the information or were familiar with those cases.
Well, that's not quite what I said, but I'm sorry, I'll let you finish your question.
Okay. That's just a summary. Since Fred Olson's group is also the applicant in Rockers 3, would it not have been possible to access that information and be familiar with it so that it could be addressed in the community?
I am actually working on the Rothers 3 project, and I have read the assessment that's been put forward. I haven't carried out, certainly as yet, but probably will do in the future, a cumulative impact assessment for Rothers 3 alongside Clashgower and other schemes that have come into the planning system, but in the future would do so. The point that I'm making is in relation to the appropriate baseline. What I can't know, and I still don't know, is, for example, I'll use Clashgower again as an example. I don't know what impact cumulatively Clashgower has, for example, to the north, northwest, northeast, or its impacts lie. I can make judgments, and the ESA can make judgments about where Clashgower lies in relation to Paul's Hill 2, and where Rothers 3 lies in relation to Paul's Hill 2, and that landscape where their cumulative effects come together. But I can't know about the totality of cumulative effects of those schemes and make judgments about those schemes, because that requires a whole different level of knowledge about those schemes, and also would require me to assess those against their baseline if I was wanting to look at it in that way. So what we've done here is assess them within the context of the appropriate part of the baseline, the appropriate part of the cumulative assessment, and the baseline for Paul's Hill 2.
I think probably what's frustrating for us is at moments it's cumulative and then at moments it's separate, and that seems to flow at convenience.
I think, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think what you're really asking me is, have I carried out a capacity study of the whole of the landscape of Murray around Rothers, Clashgower and Paul's Hill to ascertain what I professionally think is the landscape capacity for all of those wind farms? And that's where I'm saying the answer is no.
But on the assessment of residences, you're looking at it is significant, major, not significant, cumulatively. And in the report is that the cumulative addition of those wind farms will pretty much not make any difference to us because Paul's Hill 2 will exist.
No, it will. But what I need to do, and what the report will need to do, is that even though the information needs to be provided about Clashgower and Rothers 3, I know there are two schemes that you're particularly interested in, the uncertainty as to whether either or both of them will come forward and in what form is so great that it wouldn't be possible to make a decision to refuse permission for Rothers 2 on the basis that it theoretically may have an unacceptable punitive impact with Rothers 3, even when you don't know exactly what form Rothers 3 might come forward and when, or if at all, because that would be wrong.
But surely the cumulative is the purpose of it is to assume all three exist. And what would be the situation if all three existed? So, I mean, it is based on
Yes,
the
it does.
assumption they do
So,
exist.
so the ultimate, the scenario 3 in the cumulative assessment does assess, as you can see from the visualizations, assesses them all as where they are in the landscape. What it basically concluded in relation to the landscape around your property is that there was already an identified significant effect from those, and that the addition of Clashgower and Rothfuss to that would still remain a significant effect, albeit that, of course, it would be an additional effect over and above the baseline.
But it would be no more significant to have 30 turbines than it would to have 5.
Well, it's only because, again, it's back to this point of I'm not saying significant and significant plus and significant plus plus plus. I'm only saying, I think the phrase you're taking from evidence is where it says, and there would remain a significant effect on this property. Well, if there's already a significant effect, you still have a significant effect. But it does tell you in the assessment what the
cuts is very different than the
No.
significant effect of 30 cuts.
Yeah.
I mean, can that be acknowledged?
I agree with you. I know exactly what you're saying. I'm merely saying that the LVI is being carried out in the appropriate way as the way the cumulative assessment has to be done. And I'm thinking, and I know that you would like to see a cumulative capacity assessment and me making a judgment as to what was and wasn't acceptable in the landscape. That's not my role.
Well, my position is just very basic. I'm not really getting into the nuances of how it's all worked out. All I care about is if one morning I wake up and I have 5 turbines, and the next morning I wake up and I have 30. That is going to stress me out.
Yes,
so
and
you can't say it's not going to be significant.
And it would most likely have a greater impact on your residential amenity and on the visual amenity from those given locations.
And it'll have a greater impact on my holiday cottage, because when people book my place, they're booking for views. If I put a picture of 30 turbines in my Airbnb listing, I can guarantee my bookings are going to plummet. So that's my concern.
I do understand that. I know what you're asking.
The applicant frequently points out that although our westerly views, so looking directly west to the development, will be significantly affected, basically that's okay because the overall openness and views along the Arbor Valley would be retained. Could this not be considered a misleading statement or even false hope when the applicant knows that they have every intention to develop this same northern view with 29 turbines in Rockland? I mean, when they say that, they know they actually have an application in at this moment for that view. So is that not misleading?
Well, that's because
I didn't know that.
That's because Fred Olsen Renewables are not sitting in the witness box giving you evidence. I am as a professional landscape architect, and I've got to present the evidence in a manner to the reporter, which is about this scheme and this appeal and Paul's Hill 2, and that's exactly what the information does. Future scenarios are to be debated at another time.
But this future scenario is very much part of the cumulative assessment. It's not disclosed at any point in any committee, because maybe I've missed it, that Rothers 3 and Paul's Hill 2 are the same developer. And it leans very, very heavily. Many times it refers to we get to retain our northern views, so it's all okay. But if Paul's Hill is approved and Clashgower is approved and then Rothers 3 is approved, we won't retain those. So that's it's a misleading statement.
No, but those judgments of acceptability or otherwise need to be made at that time in relation to those schemes.
But how can you truly make promises that
I'm not making
don't
any promises.
worry, that view is safe when the applicant knows they have an application in right now? It's not even down the road future. They have the application in today.
No, I'm not making promises. What I'm saying is against the current baseline, and that baseline against which Paul's Hill 2 needs to be assessed, that is the current position.
In your assessment, why were holiday properties not assessed?
Well, the holiday lets
Yes.
at Courthouse was assessed because it's a separate property.
But mine wasn't.
Well, yours is assessed as a residential property.
And that's why I'm asking why. Because from the very onset, I contacted the applicant and put those issues forward.
So
But it was overlooked in the assessment.
Yeah, I think you said on the site view that you basically you're in property for about 6 months of the year and you try to let it for about 6 months a year on
Why
average.
does that make a difference?
doesn't, in the sense that the residential community study just imagines the property is being occupied fully 12 months a year. And
Well, it is being occupied
exactly.
fully 24
So it already properly assesses the impact on the property and its residential
But
community.
that, I mean, this is where we're getting into the very fine line of choosing to not acknowledge there's a holiday business. And the revenues are significant. And I lived there personally enough that I qualify to pay British taxes, so therefore I'm a resident. But also, the operation as a holiday home is significant, but it's just totally blank.
The impact on business interests isn't something that's within my expertise or remit, but what you can be assured of is in coming to assessments on residential community, it was done on the basis of your property being occupied permanently, as a permanent occupation.
But I did inform them that it operates as a holiday let when I'm not there, so that if you say 50% of the time, then that's 50% of the time it operates as a holiday let. So that's a business, a commercial business.
Yes. That steps outside my remit within residential community assessment.
So who does assess that in the whole?
Well, impact on business and tourism and so forth would be done by the planning assessment.
Did you in assessments does it consider impact on property values? Is that part of the assessment?
No, not at all. That would be completely irrelevant to my assessment, completely outside my expertise.
Even the visual impact, because the visual impact is the reason for any risk.
I have absolutely no knowledge of potential impact or otherwise on a property value or the relevance of that. I just objectively assess the impact on visual amenity and residential amenity.
Does anybody impact? Is there an assessment made at any time on holiday or tourist businesses beyond residential?
Yes, the impact on a tourism or business use would be something which would be done in the planning impact statement.
You state that seeing turbines in a view is not in itself offensive or unacceptable. Do you accept that what may be acceptable to a holiday tourist business focused on selling views and tranquility would be very different than that of an energy company?
Well, it's not that view isn't the view of an energy company. That's the view of the planning system. And basically, seeing development from your home, whether it be turbines, Tesco Superstore, or a farmer building a new cowshed, is not of itself unacceptable or offensive. You have to go beyond that to see what is the impact on the residential community of that thing.
I'm not sure if anywhere was addressed. Was it addressed in the original planning? Is nighttime lighting going to be part of policy too?
No, the only lighting associated with policy 2 would be any infrared lighting for aviation, which is not visible to the human eye. So the turbine sizes, there is no lighting. If there was lighting, then there would be a nighttime lighting assessment. But I take it by lighting, you obviously mean the 2,000 candela aviation lighting, which is visible. And the answer is no, there won't be any.
Was that taken into account for the cumulative impact of, say, Rothfuss and Fashgal? The nighttime lighting?
Yes, there is lighting on scenario 1 and scenario 2 of Fashgal, but I think my understanding is in both cases it's the assessments have been done on the basis of proximity lighting being on for no more than 2% of the time.
2% of the night, really?
Well, it's actually usually proximity lighting comes on when a plane approaches and goes off and passes away. But overall, I think the assessment would be 2%, as I remember it. But I've come here with my head full of Paul's Hill, not what I may have or may not have read about Fashgal or indeed Rothfuss.
Just a final point or question. When you were being questioned, you said, and I may not be the exact words, you have to deem impact acceptable on residences, otherwise you would have to say the application should not be approved. Is this not kind of a bias well, I have to say it's acceptable, otherwise the application cannot be approved?
No, I think I know what you mean. If it helps you, I have on a number of occasions been asked to undertake an appeal. I've been to site, I've looked at the residential situation, I've gone back and said I can't support that. I would have to go in the witness box and say that's overrunning over there. And in those cases, the scheme has been amended and changed so that I can then sit in the witness box and say I now think it's fine. So no, I don't just turn up here and say it's fine because that's what I say. And I could, if you wanted me to tell you instances where I said quite the opposite. No, I'll just give my professional, honest opinion as to whether I think I can support something or not.
And how do you, like, what is your logic, or how do you define the fine line between acceptable and not acceptable?
It's a very difficult.
What pushes one from one to the other?
It's a very difficult thing, and it's not a science. It is a matter of judgment, and particularly why senior landscape architects are generally asked to be the ones who make those judgments is that you do need experience to bring to bear, particularly of having seen and done these things a lot of, like anything in life really, in order to try to get your judgment home to a position where you are making a good and sound judgment, and isn't just something that's kind of rather off the cuff or flippant, because that would be completely wrong. I've had a lot of experience over many, many years of dealing with residential situations. I've had many, many experiences of seeing where inspectors and reporters have commented on my judgment. And I've tried very, very hard to hone my judgment over the years so that I'm bringing as objective assessment as I can to bear. But it is nonetheless still a matter of professional judgment.
And the residents' judgment's not really taken into the equation?
No, it is. You will present your judgment to the reporter, because ultimately here, it's not my judgment that will hold sway. I'm merely giving my professional opinion to the reporter. The reporter will also hear your opinion, Mr. Bonzio's opinion, and ultimately he'll have to apply his professional judgment to these matters.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mandel. I had a couple of questions, I think. I'm in as to whether to ask the first one. I think it's perhaps slightly naughty in that I'm not sure anyone's actually raised this as a concern, but it's something that was going around in my head, and I'm sure it's something that ministers might want to think about, and I'm sure you've thought about the issue with your experience. The issue was, we've talked about, or we've heard from you, on the issue of compatibility between what's now proposed and Paul's Hill 1,
Yes.
in terms of scale and layout, etc. And you took us to a certain viewpoint where, in your view, what you're looking at gives the impression that Paul's Hill 2 is simply closer. They're bigger, but you say they're compatible in scale, and what it actually looks as though it's the same wind farm with some being further away and some being closer. I was conscious that in other wind farms, and as I say, I don't believe it's been raised at this specific point, but in other cases, there are arguments about foreshortening of views and visual confusion and diminishing the scale of the landscape, and
Yes.
as a result of putting bigger turbines in front of smaller ones, or you know, that issue. And as I say, as it entered my head, and I know it will enter ministers' heads, so I need to put something down on that issue. To what extent has that been taken into account? When you actually see it on the ground in 3 dimensions, what is it fair to say that what might appear logical in a flat piece of paper may not appear quite so comfortable to the naked eye?
Absolutely, sir, and I agree. I thought you were going to say visual confusion, because if you hadn't, that's what I was going to say, because that is one of the tests, and I have taken that into consideration. And it is perfectly possible that a badly designed extension to wind farm can give rise to various problems in terms of how one perceives the two wind farms in the landscape. And I do know, because looking at schemes that I've been working on, where a larger scheme in the foreground and a smaller scheme in the background can actually make it look not as a single scheme, but that the smaller scheme in the background is some kilometres away behind, when really it isn't. And you do tend to get some visual confusion in the landscape. That hasn't occurred in this regard, I think, partly because of the way the landform, and we can come back to Roy's Hill, the way that Roy's Hill does function in relation to the skyline of Roy's Hill. All of the turbines are seen behind and in that upland landscape, and in that upland landscape together. And they don't read as 2 separate wind farms with 1 one bigger one in the foreground and one smaller one in the background. I think they do read as there are some turbines that appear larger because they're closer to me, and some that appear smaller because they're further away from me. But it still reads as a single wind farm in the landscape. I think in that context, I didn't feel that visual confusion had arisen.
On the question of hub height and rotor diameter still being undetermined or non-finalised, do you not think that makes it very difficult to assess the impact, both in that respect, in terms of comparing the size and the scale and rotational speed and all of that, but in all other respects as well, when one doesn't actually know that what's shown in the visualisations is in fact what one might be approving?
Yes, sir. The answer is it does make it more difficult. I'm dealing with a lot of schemes and lots of schemes in planning now where it's common now for the application to be to blade tip. And therefore, we assessing it have to take into account that there may be variation within the scheme. And that has been taken into account, and as you'll see in my report. When I went around and decided what did I think about the assessments that had been made in the LVIA, I did have it in my mind that it could move between 117 blade tip up to as much as 131. And what impact would that have? I asked myself at each point where I was making a judgment. And would that change the significance of the effect or lead to some other undesirable effect which I might not be able to support? I felt in this regard that particularly because of the distance and location of the viewpoints, the perception of the difference in those blade tip lengths would not be so great as to make that occur. Now, one area again where I think that there is some greater possibility of appreciating the greater swept path work to occur with the turbine 144 glass. Again, I didn't come to the view that any change between the 117 and the visualisations and the larger swept path would lead to overwhelming or overbearing impacts. But I did recognise that it would be more perceptible from there than it would from other locations, and that was part of the reason behind what I said.
Let's say we don't have visualization showing the other extreme, you know, a much bigger turbine. So I've just got to take your professional view on that.
Yes, there is a debate at the moment, sir, as to whether what is the worst case, because of course what one would intend to set out in an assessment would be the worst case, and some people say they think the worst case is higher hub height, and some people say they think the worst case is greater swept path. And there is no absolute judgment on which is the worst case in that regard. So in effect, an applicant has to decide to go for one or the other, and then assessors like myself are left to make the judgments between the parameters.
My final question was in relation to forestry and what reliance you can place upon screening from forestry. It came up, I think, in Evidence in Chief with Mr. Trinick, where you're talking about a specific point raised by Mr. Bonzio, I think, in relation to some walks. And you're talking about, I think, the phrase of successional nature of you don't just blast everything down, there's a rotation. I'm just wondering about the broader point on forestry. I know there are a number of viewpoints from which, at the moment, it would appear that you do get some benefit from existing forest cover. And I think Ms. Anderson had raised a point in one of the visualisations for Clashgow where I think her point was is you may see more of Paul's Hill 2 were that plantation to disappear. And I think there was another one I think that you'd raised in your inquiry report on the minor road going up to Dallas where you say, well, you can't really see it from here. But it appeared to me that a big contributor to that not being seen was a plantation. I'm just wondering to what extent can I or ministers place any reliance on those existing forest plantations?
Well, obviously, sir, at some point, those forestry plantations could be felled. That's their purpose. They'll only be felled when they mature to a point where it's economically viable to take the timber out. They're not going to be felled for any reason prior to that. I've got no indication or knowledge that any of the forestry areas where I have shown them to be screening are imminently being felled because they're not that mature. And indeed, the trees that Mr. Bonzio's felled at his own property were immature from the point of view of timber production. And Mr. Bonzio says the trees were felled for other reasons. But I haven't seen any indication that a forestry plantation which runs Green's Paul's Hill is in the cycle of approaching the felling regime because of the age of timber. And even again then, as I said earlier, I do recognise that then these things are felled on a rolling programme. So it would be unlikely for huge swathes to be felled at one time, partly because it's just not economic for them to do so.
They would, it's probably fair to say, within the 35-year lifetime, everything we see here will have gone and probably gone and come back up again, or partially, at some point.
If you want to see that in action, so it's the viewpoint from just to the south of Archerstown, even in the time since that visualisation was taken, which is not very long ago, and you can see in the visualisation the Paulsville turbines, the forestry there has always grown sufficiently to screen those views already. It's still relatively immature, it'll be there for many, many years, but it still has got like extension growth, which is now, if you to take a photograph today, it will screen the Paulsville turbines out. But it will, because it's there, it's visibly there in the landscape now.
Mr. Trinick.
Thanks. I've just got 2 or 3 points. And 2 out of 3, or maybe 2 out of 2, are really just to make sure we're looking at the right thing, as opposed to using it as a medium to get to that point. In questions from the Council, Mrs. Scott drew your attention to siting and design wind farms in the landscape. She referred to CD 5.3. Now, CD 5.3 is that, but see, that version has been superseded, I think, by CD 5.23. We have, for some reason, both before the inquiry. Now,
should be version 3A, August 2017.
CD 5.3 is February 2017. 3A is CD 5.23, which is August 2017. So if you're looking for the latest version, so it is CD 5.23. Now, I have checked, and actually the paragraphs which Mrs. Scott put to Mr. Denny are the same in both versions, and they're the same numbers. But just so you know, that is the later version, CD 5.23. Was not really.
Well, I apologise for that because
no need to. That's it. Thank you.
I was reading from the
No need. Don't go on, please. That's the end of that question. The second and final point, I think, relates to your 412 in your inquiry report. Where you were asked where a quotation came from. Page 21. I think you agreed with Mr. Campbell that quotation came from the LCS. Are you sure about that?
No, that's actually a quotation of myself.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yes.
That comes from later in your the same document, doesn't it?
It does, yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Those are the questions.
Okay, that concludes the case for the applicant. We'll have a 10-minute break to rearrange tables and things. Does it make sense to move the witness table across the other side of the room? I'm easy, really. You're easy on that? If everyone's easy, we'll just leave the table where it is. Yep, fine. Okay, well, 10 minutes and we'll reconvene. Thank you. On the assumption that you're not going to take an hour and a half with your chief, then we'll be in a position where the cross-examination from Mr. Trinick will have started, so you'll be stuck overnight in that position. I'm sure you understand the rules of that. But I think it's better to do that rather than take an early break. And I think we're slightly ahead of ourselves, but I'd rather it stayed that way rather than we take a chance and end up, especially as you need to be away by lunchtime tomorrow. Yeah.
Fixed end time this afternoon. I don't know how long that Ms. Alston will take in chief, but the meeting's going on a bit late, and I think we're going to finish then.
I've forgotten how long you said you need. I thought it was 3 hours, Mr. Trinick.
We'll see.
Well, we'll see how we get on. Anyway, when you're ready, Mr. Scott.
Thank you. I think in relation to your recognition, if you maybe just read out the introduction to explain who you are and read out the conclusions, then I think the rest can be taken as read along with the inquiry report.
Okay. My name is Carol Anderson. I obtained my professional qualification in landscape architecture in 1986, and I'm a chartered member of the Landscape Institute. I worked for local authorities, the Forestry Commission, and in private practice before setting up my own consultancy in 2001. My particular expertise is in landscape and visual impact assessment, landscape character assessment, and landscape capacity studies. I was co-author of the 2012 and updated 2017 Moray Wind Energy Landscape Capacity Studies. I provide term landscape consultancy services to Moray Council, and as part of this role, I undertook the review of the proposed Paul's Hill 2 wind farm from scoping to submission of the application. This recognition should be read in conjunction with my more detailed inquiry report. I'll just move on to my conclusions. Moray already accommodates a substantial number of large wind turbines, and with dwindling areas of less sensitive uplands remaining, the Council considers that there are very limited opportunities for further development to be accommodated. The Council also considers it important that any additional schemes fit well with existing wind energy developments, and that they are sited and designed to minimise landscape and visual effects, including cumulative effects with other wind farms. This proposal is poorly sited and designed. It would erode the design rationale of the operational Paul's Hill wind farm, and in so doing, be contrary to SNH guidance on best practice in siting and designing wind farm extensions. It would be contrary to policy ER1 set out in the Moray Council's local development plan, in that it does not comply with the guidance set out in the MWELCS, the capacity study. It would have a significant detrimental impact on landscape character and visual amenity, and it would be inappropriate in respect of the scale and character of its setting, and would not respect the main features of the site, which includes Roy's Hill and the existing Paul's Hill wind farm.
Thank you. I've just got one question for you before I hand you over to Mr. Chinnock. If you were able to look at Mr. Denny's recognition, paragraph 8.
That I'm sorry, I don't have. Oh, hang on. I think I do have it. Sorry, yes, I do have it.
This is a point covered by Mr. Denny in his recognition and also covered in some detail in his evidence, where he says that his view is that the Council has prescriptively applied the guidance in the landscape capacity study. I think he described it as a series of tests and you either passed or failed. In relation to your assessment of the proposal, what did the Council ask you to do, and do you feel that there was a prescriptive application of the tests?
To answer the question first about my commission from the Council, I was asked to review the Paul's Hill 2 wind farm proposal. I commented on the proposal at scoping level and also at application level. In terms of the prescriptive application of guidance, the landscape capacity study is a strategic study. It does provide information on relative sensitivity of different landscape character types to different forms of wind energy development. I don't think it's correct to say that it sets out a series of tests and it's prescriptive, in that this sort of implies that in some ways that the guidance that's set out in the study is a sort of tick box, and you have to comply with a test or not. It's not the same as defining the distance, for example, of a settlement from a wind farm development of 2 kilometres, which is a sort of policy in terms of wind energy development. When I considered the Paul's Hill 2 proposal, I looked in detail at the visual information that was submitted as part of that, and indeed the landscape and visual impact assessment, went out on site and made my judgment on that basis, not necessarily considering whether it complied as a series of tests set out in the capacity study.
I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. String.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Ms. Hanson.
Good afternoon.
First, some preamble. You've already got the documents notified you need,
Yes.
so I think you've got them by you, so we
Yes.
won't have to scrabble around at this stage. And I've notified you, so, of the documents as well. When I refer to figures, I'll probably forget to say AI or ES. I will be referring to the AI figures almost entirely, except whether there isn't one there and I have to go back to the ES. So you'll need
Right.
CD 110 beside you all the time.
Okay, I think we have got the ES ones. Yes, sorry, we have it.
You've got the AI one.
Yes.
That's good. Secondly, I won't be referring to your precognition. So when I refer to paragraph numbers, if I don't say which it is, it's always the inquiry report.
Right, okay.
And thirdly, although probably an unnecessary and trite preamble, the usual rules apply, that there are going to be lots of differences of opinion. They're simply not worth exploring because we know where we differ. What I'm going for, as always, are the reasons for those opinions and
Absolutely.
the documents that underpin them.
Mm-hmm.
So I start really trying to find out where we're apart, both in terms of methodology, in terms of approach, in terms of the issues, and some other generalities. So first of all, in terms of your method of assessment, I think you generally adopt that of the LVIA. Is that correct?
Yes, it's largely adopted as conforming with GLVIA 3.
Yeah. I don't think that any material differences we need to explore in terms of the general approach to landscape impact and visual impact assessment, unless you know of them.
No, I think it's a matter of difference of opinion.
So do I. Good. Turning, therefore, to the first, what I've got, narrowing down point, where are we at the moment? You've got, if you go to paragraph 3.1 of the inquiry report, you see you've recorded in bullet points the reasons for objection. And the fourth bullet point is indeed reason for objection 4 by Murray, and you've accurately recorded what Murray say. And this is about turbine 1. But I think I'm right in saying that in your inquiry report you don't specifically engage on turbine 1 at all, do you? You talk in paragraph 5.6, if you want to go to it, about large close views of very large turbines seen from inside the properties, but you don't isolate T1, do you?
I don't.
So can we take it that when you are talking about large turbines in 5.6, you are reflecting reason for objection 4?
Yes, I am, yes.
So can we take it that when you're talking about very large turbines, you are, because you're representing the council, you're referring to turbine 1?
No, I'm referring to the whole proposal.
So the whole...
I'm talking about the proposal, the turbines that you would see from those properties.
So, and I'm not criticising you for slightly widening the scope, because the reason for rejection 4 only refers to turbine 1, but in your evidence, you are addressing all of the turbines that you can see from Cordlas.
I am.
Very well. And when did you last visit Cordlas and Glenarder for the purposes of this inquiry?
I visited yesterday.
Yes. And when before that?
I visited it just before my review of the application.
Right. And so yesterday you would have seen the felled trees?
Yes, I did.
All right, that's okay.
That's why I visited again.
No, well, I understand that. Well, that's absolutely fine. In terms of cumulative impacts, changing topic slightly, when you assess effects in your inquiry report, are you assessing, you'll know what I mean, so I will proceed, are you assessing the totality of the effects, the in-combination effects, or are you assessing the additional effects of Paul's Hill on any given baseline?
I'm considering my cumulative assessment, which is in section, starts paragraph 5.15 of my report. It principally focuses on the effects, combined effects of this proposal with Clashgar and Rothes 3. So it's looking at the application scenario 3, I think it's mentioned in the AI report.
So your baseline is whatever is there. I don't think it's only under construction. And there's another consented but not built in the relevant baseline, is there?
I've considered consented and existing as the baseline, and that's in the other parts of my inquiry report.
That's useful. So in the rest of your report, you consider what I would call scenarios 1 and 2.
Yes.
Section 5.15 onwards considers scenario 3.
Yes.
On an in-combination basis.
Yes.
Okay, that's good. Now, we know there's no objection from the National Park, and you take no designation points in your report. So far as SNH is concerned, we might usefully use look at 212, CD 212. And dig out paragraph 4.6 of your inquiry report as well. In 4.6, you tell us what SNH say, and in the last sentence, while they consider the resultant significant effects are likely to be relatively limited in extent, they note that the design of the extension could be improved, reflecting the LCS. It's not quite what they say, is it? If you go to paragraph 2, if it's a CD 212, and you go to page 4, that's page 4 of 8, it says. Under the heading of landscape, visual and cumulative impacts, they record that the increased height would mean the previous containment would be breached, visibility would be introduced to the Spey Valley, and so forth. Talk about the Cairngorms National Park. While the resultant significant effects are relatively limited in extent, we consider further mitigation could be achieved to improve the design extension. But they then go on to say, however, we've taken into account the other natural heritage interests on site and consider that the embedded mitigation for the Spey, SAC and the Hen Harrier are on balance more important at Paul's Hill and should not be compromised by changes to further reduce landscape and visual impacts. Although if design changes are identified that would not compromise the mitigation, we recommend such amendments are made. So they did hedge quite carefully what they said about making changes to the scheme for landscape and visual purposes by reference to other factors.
They did, but I think that, in my opinion, that doesn't change the points that they make about design and the poor design of aspects of the scheme.
Well, I suggest it does, because if the reporter is recording SNH's position, he needs to note that what they said about improving design was subject to not compromising other mitigation, and that's quite important, isn't it?
Well, it might be important, but I think that has to be explored to see how important it might be in terms of any changes that could be made, and that hasn't been done by the applicant.
How do you know that?
We have a very late proposal to, for example, remove one of the turbines, and in terms of the date of this letter is the 25th of July. Yes, the application had been submitted at that point, but the wording of SNH's letter is if design changes are identified that would not compromise the mitigation for the SAC, then we would recommend such amendments are made. So it's kind of a caveat, but you can't really tell that that would have an impact in terms of, any redesign that could have been done.
Well, turbine 1 is certainly being removed, so that's not a design change as such. That's simply taking out a turbine.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of other design changes, have you read chapters 3, Design Evolution, chapter 7,
Yes, I have.
Ornithology,
Yes, I have.
chapter 8 in detail, and you'll know, therefore, of the account that was carefully taken of the SAC and hen harrier interests, won't you?
Yes, I understand that. But what I'm saying is SNH don't seem to be that certain about it in terms of wording in this letter, because it does have a degree of uncertainty about it. They don't say it would definitely have an impact on the SAC.
I'll have you agree. Thank you very much. Now, you're familiar with SNH responses of various kinds to various applications.
I certainly am.
Thought you might be. And they range from we object to through a variety of levels that we're not terribly happy, but all right, to very mild responses. And I suggest, to cut to the chase, that this is an example of a pretty mild response to an application.
I don't agree. And the reason I don't agree is because they have quite specifically noted design amendments that could be made. I think if it was mild, they wouldn't have mentioned that at all.
Have you known many SNH responses that haven't recommended some changes?
I have known quite a few, actually.
All right, well, we'll agree to differ on that. Go to CD 27 if you... Do I need to go there? No, we've done court last. If you go to your inquiry report at 4.2, and what you tell us here in the last sentence, and I better read the other because the word therefore is in there. You talk about the landscape capacity study, potential scope for large and very large turbines, and we are partially in such an area, that's fine. But you'd say that what the LCS says is we'll need to demonstrate the turbines won't cause significant adverse effects on sensitivities identified for each LCT. Therefore, the principle of turbines within the development area is not accepted, etc. Go to 5.1, would you? And you say there, the Council doesn't dispute that the LCT could accommodate further wind. Of your report.
Sorry, 5, sorry.
Sorry,
For
don't worry.
CD 5.1, I was thinking, what is that?
No, my apologies, I should have said.
Sorry, can you repeat that again?
The Council, 5.1 of your inquiry report, the Council does not dispute that the open rolling uplands LCT could accommodate further wind turbine development. However, it considers this particular proposal is not the right development in the right place. Obviously, that's a familiar phrase, but I suggest actually it's not quite the case, that your case here is that this is the wrong development in potentially the right place, which is somewhat different. Your case is not locational so much as a matter of siting and design.
Well, I think we have an application that is for a given number of turbines at a given height. So in considering the application as it stands, it isn't the right development in the right place.
No, I know that I accept that you say it's not the right development, but indeed if you go to 6.2 to make the point again, sorry, not 6.2, I'll come to it. Let's carry on from where I was. I'd suggest what you're really telling the inquiry is this is the wrong development. It's too high. I don't know what you're saying about layer. It doesn't really matter. But it's not the development in necessarily the wrong place. There might well be scope for a development in this place, but it's not this development.
There might be scope, yes, that's correct. And certainly the turbines are too large in that location. If they were in a different location, perhaps set more into the upland core area, then that size of turbine could potentially be accommodated.
To take that point further, if you go to the AI figures and you go to figure 11, which is right at the back.
That's CB10, isn't it?
110, that's it, yeah.
CB 110.
Now, this shows from the LCS, and I stress the LCS, not the supplementary guidance. We'll come on to that later. The LCS, it shows the hatched area,
Yes.
and we see that half the turbines, I don't know what it is really, nearly half, are within the area indicated as having potential for large and very large turbines. Yeah. We can also see, and I think we do need to go to the SG here, map 4 within CD44. We passed them in this morning, sir. You have a hard copy there.
Oh, yes, there's that way.
You go to map 1 or map 4, it doesn't really matter. Although map 4 is more dedicated to the point I'm addressing. In map 4, you'll see you know it very well, obviously, the area of hatching in the figure small Roman 2 in open rolling uplands, and that's indicated as an area where there's limited scope to accommodate the large development typology in this landscape. The same siting principles apply for the extra large turbines up to 150 metres. That's for extensions and repowering.
Yes.
What I'm suggesting to you is you're saying, and I understand your evidence, that these turbines are too high. But in terms of, this is not really a locational case so far as the council is concerned, is it? You're not saying no development could take place in this location. It's the wrong place. You're saying this is the wrong development.
Yes.
But potentially in the right place.
Potentially, yes.
Right. That's all I was trying to get at. So we need to focus then on what wrong development means and what the scope of the council's case on wrong development is. If we go to CD22, which is the report of handling, what, have I got the right number, Mr. Scott, there? Is it 22? No, it's 26, I apologise, I knew I'd get that wrong.
Oh, yes.
And it's not paginated, but if you keep turning the pages until you get to a left page, at least in my version, with the heading Visual Impact. There's a 26. 26. Has anybody heard it must be 27. I've numbered mine according to the CD list, but it's the report of handling I'm after anyway. It's Appendix 1, correct.
Sorry, is it the planning committee report?
Yes.
Yes.
But for clarity, there's a covering report and an appendix, which is the detailed assessment, and they're all one document.
Thank you. And if you turn on to define the heading halfway down the page, Visual Impact. It's an awfully brief reference, and I apologise to everybody, but do we see there that in the second paragraph at the end, the planning officer says the council's principal concerns relate to effects from the following representative viewpoints, and then we've got viewpoint 1, viewpoint 6 and 7. So those are the council's principal visual concerns, 1, 6 and 7.
Yes.
We can note that and then move on to your own report, where you focus on, I think, 4 viewpoints in total. Unless I've missed some, there are 1, 3, 7 and 9. Those are the 4 viewpoints that you discuss in your inquiry report. If you think I'm wrong, do tell me.
Well, can you just refer me to the paragraph where they are said, or are they dotted around?
They're dotted around.
Okay.
I mean, do come back to me later if you think I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I didn't get a note of those in
1,
those answers.
3, 7 and 9. Now, whichever map you want to go to. I've got the A1 inquiry map in front of me from CD 110. Doesn't really matter. Whichever map shows the viewpoint locations on it, I don't mind. Are you okay to go, sir? Right. Now, viewpoint 3 is Benrins at 15.2 kilometres. We know where that is. Viewpoint 9 is on the A95 between Avalara and Ballindalloch at 10.7 kilometres. Now, my understanding is that these viewpoints are principally referred to by you in order to discuss the screening of the development by Roy's Hill.
The screening, but also the design of the wind farm. For example, with Ben Winner's viewpoint 3, I discuss how it appears to spill down from the upland edge.
Indeed, and we'll come back to the spilling down point. But so it's screening by Roy's Hill and matters of design. That's what you use those viewpoints for.
Yes.
And when we come on to viewpoint 1 at the distillery at Tormore at 5.9 kilometres, and viewpoint 7, which we'll revisit no doubt numerous times, at Upper Knockando, view 4.3 kilometres. So my suggestion is that although you use viewpoints 3 and 9, really the main focus of your case is within about 5 or 6 kilometres. That's where you focus your attention.
Yes, I would agree. And I have very clearly said in my inquiry report that the effects, the significant adverse effects, are relatively localised. I have been clear on that.
You have indeed. Can we also agree that most of your concerns relate to, broadly speaking, visual as opposed to landscape character effects? I know you give evidence on the Broad Valley farmland and the significant effects on that landscape character type at 5.2 and 5.3 of your report. And you do note upland, moorland forestry, LCT 10, at 5.4 in the context of viewpoint 7. But I interpreted most of your concerns to be visual rather than landscape character. Would I be correct?
I think there's both there. In terms of landscape character, as you say, it is the effects on those transitional landscapes that are settled and smaller scale, which form part of the Broad Farm Valley, and also the upland, moorland and forestry landscape character types in the sort of Upper Knockando area. So that's a landscape effect. And then I do describe and focus on visual effects, and visual effects emanating from what I consider, in my view, to be poor design and different sort of scale aspects in terms of the fit of that proposal in that location.
That's how I understand your evidence as well. So let's just tackle the Broad Valley farmland landscape effect first and see how far your evidence goes. If you take out the zoomed ZTV we produced this morning, which was produced because of the difficulties in detecting anything at the small scale, what was in the ES. We can see Paul's Hill, the 5 blue dots, Paul's Hill 2 rather, and that's in the type 11, and those are recorded in red letters, the landscape types. And then down to the southeast we have the Broad Valley farmland area 7, and to the northeast area 10, the upland forestry and moorland. What I just want to get some idea of is how far into the Broad Valley farmland do you see significant landscape character effects extending? I ask for the purposes of my closing submissions, not because I want to disagree with your evidence.
I'm trying to read the number of boxes, kilometre boxes underneath there. I think it's roughly about sort of 6 kilometres, 5-6 kilometres in there. What I should point out to the reporter, though, is that, so you're probably aware that landscape character types have fluid boundaries. So you have a line on a map shown here. There is a transition that occurs in this landscape as it borders the upland area. And you'll see that, no doubt, as you've been out on site. I feel that the landscape that will be particularly affected forms a sort of broad triangle at the foot of Roy's Hill, includes sort of Upper Knockando, and then goes, there's a sort of triangle of roads.
Can you go
as
slowly
well.
a minute? I want to follow this carefully.
Yes.
Okay, so the triangle, start again.
So you have You have the broad farmed valley,
Yes.
which really covers the Spey and some of its lower slopes. But then you've got an area that's coloured orange just to the north of that. You get quite strong enclosure of the surrounding uplands, including Roy's Hill to the west, and then the other hills to the east. And it's focused on the road that goes between Upper Knockando and Dallas.
Yeah.
So it's that sort of triangle there where there's a transitional character. It's much more settled than in the core of landscape character area 10, which is the upland, moorland and forestry, and landscape character 11, which is the open rolling uplands. So you do get that sort of bleeding out of character. The gardens, the landscape's much more settled and farmed. Still has some sort of upland characteristics, but more upland fringe.
All right, I think I understand that. Within 6 kilometres, broad valley farmland. But the triangle I'm just not quite clear about. Give me, what would be the centre point of the triangle?
Probably just north of Upper Knockando. You have
Oh, just north of it?
yes, you have a minor road that is at the base. It's a single track road.
Yep.
That's at the foot of Carnacally, I think it is. The upland area to the northeast. And then you've got the slopes of Roy's Hill to the west.
All right.
So you get a sort of funnel shape, and that landscape there's a number of burns in there and valleys, as we know, and it's more settled and farmed.
All right, so it's a mixture of upland, moorland and forestry and broad valley farmland.
Yes.
I put it further south. I've now come north to follow your answer, and that's now it makes sense. I wasn't making sense before.
Okay.
Thank you. That's really useful. Needless to say we don't agree, but I now know exactly where you are. I can submit on that, and thank you. Turn to cross-examination rather more proper, having sort of explored the scope of your case. I want to turn to the landscape capacity study. Now, I know that you and I have been here before, but we're not with this reporter. We must bear that in mind. This is a fresh exercise over again. So let's get out CD 411, and you might as well get out CD 44, the supplementary guidance, at the same time.
Do you want the appendix report or the
I think
main
you
report?
will need the main report,
The main report.
but you will also need the character area maps. And therefore, you probably need the appendix as well.
Sorry, character area maps, you mean the maps that go with the supplementary guidance?
I mean, all
Yes.
these.
Oh, those, right, they're in, right, yes, okay.
That's for the LCS.
Okay.
For the supplementary guidance, you'll need the main document and the large maps we handed out this morning. Tidying myself up. I want to do a quick canter through this study first of all, so we understand. We have a common understanding of what it says, for the benefit of the reporter. If you go to paragraph 2.2, and this is on page 7, sir. Which is the most useful, paragraph numbers or page numbers? Paragraph numbers, okay, 2.2. There you give a definition, it's not yours, it comes from Swanwick in 2002, of landscape capacity, the degree to which a particular landscape character type or areas capable to accommodate change without significant effects on its character or overall change of landscape character type. Now, it does say without significant effects on character or overall change, so it envisages apparently any significant effects on landscape character. As a practical point, how much use is that advice in the context of a development which is bound to give rise to significant landscape character effects?
I think you should look at the heading for 2.2. It says background to landscape capacity. It is really providing the background. It's stating there's no formally agreed approach or methodology. Having said that, just very recently, there has been a new publication on approaches to landscape capacity. It was too late to put on the core documents list, but that's been published by, sorry, I'm not sure, is it
Well, it's not
English
before the
nature?
inquiry.
It's not before the inquiry,
Don't
but
worry.
it is. But what this section of the report is doing is giving you the background. I don't express a view in terms of how appropriate that is to a wind energy development.
Well, you do actually, and I'll come on to that. But
Okay.
can I stick with my
Well, not
question?
in this section of the report, I don't. We're focusing on this at the moment.
Be careful how far you go before we come on to the next point. My question was simply this. If we adopt that, if we were to adopt that as definition of landscape capacity, my suggestion is it's somewhat less than useful in the sense that this is a type of development which is, we acknowledge, bound to give rise to some significant landscape character effects. So if you start off from the position that any development is going to breach a capacity threshold, how far does that take you?
Well, I think the study provides information on relative sensitivity, assuming that there would be some significant effects.
Yeah, can you come back to my question, please? How useful is such a definition when, by definition, the development is going to give rise to some significant effects? What use is that definition? You're beyond the threshold of the capacity
I agree.
before you start.
I think it has limited applicability. At 2002, I mean, it's very outdated. I mean, really, this section of the report, as I say, is giving some background on what guidance there is, certainly at the time of writing this report. You know, it applies that landscape capacity statement there in italics, applies to a whole range of developments that you might do landscape capacity studies for. Mm-hmm. So you can do it for housing, you can do it for agriculture,
Yeah, I understand that.
forestry, etc.
So perhaps we can agree that for the purposes of wind energy development, there may be somewhat less use that definition than might be the case for some other forms of development because of the inevitability of significant effects.
Yes, I think it's a bit of a catch-all, but I think it is dated as well.
It's dated as well. Well, it's interesting because you go on to 2.3, turn over the page, and you say, and as you saying this, the following definitions apply to this study. This is written in 2017. And we go down to the definition of landscape capacity, and you repeat what's in the 2002 document, nearly. So you've adopted that yourself in this study.
Well, no, it doesn't say that, does it? Because
No, it
under
doesn't.
landscape capacity, it says unacceptable significant adverse impacts. It
But
doesn't
that's the
say
point.
just significant adverse impacts.
Well, it does say that. It says to how far a development can accommodate, can accommodate development without unacceptable significant adverse impacts on its character. So you've retained the wording about significant adverse impacts and added in unacceptable.
Mm-hmm.
So you've not only retained a definition of capacity in terms of significant impacts, but you've lost it with your own word unacceptable. That's correct, isn't it?
I wouldn't use the word, the term glossed. I think it's really considering that there could be some significant effects, but they may not be unacceptable in terms of a particular landscape or visual receptors.
Well, I see why you say what you say, but the problem is that in using the word unacceptable, you have inevitably trespassed on planning territory. You're making a planning judgment, because what is or is not acceptable is not your judgment. It's a matter of the planning balance, isn't it?
Yes, and I have to say I do not tend to use the term acceptable or unacceptable. It does, but I think also in terms of landscape capacity in this study and how people might use the study in looking at specific development proposals, to me that looking at significant adverse impacts would look at maybe the extent of impacts or the severity of them in coming to a view on acceptability.
Well, we go around the houses, but the fact is you're still reaching a judgment about acceptability in a pure landscape and visual document, aren't you? You're purporting to reach conclusions about the acceptability of development. That's what you say.
Well, there is some judgment there, yes. I don't think that necessarily pans out in the sensitivity assessments. Sensitivity assessments do identify and give guidance on potential significant adverse impacts for each landscape character type.
All right, we'll have your answer. 273, if you go move on to page 11. And resuming a rather quicker canter, we see the development typologies that you have assessed, but we also note after the bold type that in addition the appraising of repowering potential has considered larger turbines, indeed up to 200 metres to blade tip. So there we are. In 2.8 on page 11, the sensitivity assessment starts, and that I'm not going to read it through. The reporter has it in front of him. You tell us about the sensitivity criteria, and then you move on to page 15, where you give you explain the sensitivity ratings, and there's no criticism there. I'm just saying that's what you do. On page 16, at 211, second paragraph onwards to page 17, you tell us of the consequences for capacity of certain sensitivity ratings, high, medium, high, or high, medium rather, medium or lower, don't you?
Yes.
That's fine. Then chapter 4 discusses very large turbines, and that starts at page 20. And I just wanted to pick out one or two points so we can come back to them only for that purpose at this stage as we go through. We can note that the appraisal for repowering for more than 130 metres to blade tip did include open rolling uplands, because that was a type or subtype where you found some scope for the large typology. That's the approach you took.
In the previous study,
I understand.
Yes.
That's fine. That was the 2012 study?
That's correct.
Yeah. And proposals, next paragraph, so my voice is going, for much larger turbines are commonly associated with repowering, etc. Well, just stop there. Is that really right? I mean, I don't know of a single repowering proposal in Murray at present, but I do know of two new developments and one extension. That's Clashgar, Rothestry, and Paul's Hill, where larger, these size of turbines over 130 metres are proposed. So the prophecy hasn't really come true, has it?
No, but you have to remember that this was written, it's 2017, but it was undertaken in 2015, and I think things were different then.
They were, and I'm not criticising your complete lack of foresight.
Can I just
yes,
interrupt?
please do, of course.
Sorry. Can I also say that that wording was agreed? I was working with another consultant on this study, and a consultant a landscape consultant who had done recent landscape and visual impact assessment of wind farm development, and he had done some investigation into that, and some of that text came from a wind farm developer.
That's absolutely fine. As I said, I'm not being too critical. It was what it was when you were writing in 2015. What I'm saying is that really hasn't come to pass, has it? What we have is not a single repowering proposal. The only proposals for this size of turbine are actually for two new developments. Well, Clashgar, is it new? I don't know. We'll debate that later. And Rothes 3. And then the extension to Paul's Hill. That's where we've seen the larger turbines come forward in Murray.
That's correct. Yes.
It's only there's no trick in it.
Yes.
It's just a factual question.
I'm just wondering what category Doronel fits in, because that was the consent, and then it was larger turbines. So
I can't remember, to be honest. Down to the bottom of page 20. And the reason I'm harping on repowering is I'll come back to it, and this is why I want to rehearse this carefully, that what you did in looking at very large turbines was to model things using the existing turbine positions.
yes, that's correct.
So for Paul's Hill, you modelled 150 and 200 metres, but using the Paul's Hill 1 turbine positions.
Yes, and using sort of 10 key viewpoints across Moray.
Yes, indeed. And we'll come to the visualizations later. Moving forward in this section, we then come on to the key findings, and we can note, not on this page, but on the following page at the bottom of that table 4, there's a comment about Paul's Hill. I'm not going to read it out, it says what it says. And then the next paragraph, to be fair to you, there's a cautionary note sounded about views from the Spey Valley because of Paul's Hill, Buryburn, Rothes 1 and 2. Then we come on to table 5, viewpoint analysis, and we have point 1, Tormore Distillery. On page 25, this section concludes with, first of all, the top of page 25, a comment about potential at Paul's Hill and other sites, and then some conclusions. And just dwell there for a moment, that for open rolling uplands, first paragraph under the conclusions, and area 10, upland, moorland and forestry, offers greatest opportunity for repowering to around 150 metres, while minimising landscape and visual effects. And you didn't think there's any scope for up to 200 metres, next paragraph. And repowering, last paragraph, of operational wind farms could offer opportunities to mitigate, etc., etc. So that's the advice you gave. Then on page 75 of the document, we have the open rolling uplands advice. And that takes us on to page 77. Some very limited scope has been identified for very large turbines around 150 metres high. That doesn't specifically say for repowering, does it?
It doesn't, no.
So the advice given is there's limited scope for the sort of turbines proposed here, but not necessarily on the locations of existing turbines.
No.
That's somewhere within area 11.
No, that's generally across the landscape character.
Generally across that landscape type. And indeed some limited scope for large ones as well, but we're concentrating on very large.
Though with caveats set out in terms of the guidance, but also the constraints in 17.2.3.
Correct. I wasn't bypassing those. We will come back to the constraints later. Then at the very end, on the summary of findings, page 91, well, look, we have what we have. We needn't dwell on that. I don't think there's anything new there, except at 21.3 on page 93. And this is where the landmark hills come in, isn't it? Strategic landscape issues. You say, and I'm praising, So far, we've looked at individual areas within Murray. Now let's look at Murray more widely and at the strategic landscape issues which should regulate or advise on further development. And you've got landmark hills, less developed upland areas, and so it goes on. Just so we narrow things down at this stage, we know that landmark hills are between us, Roy's Hill. I'd say that in terms of 2132, less developed upland areas, that's not an issue we need to discuss in detail, is it?
No.
And ditto, obviously, 2133, the coast and wider seascape. And you can get too involved in that. Or 2134, extensive forests and dramatic valleys, narrow valleys. I'm not involved in that. Scenic approaches to Murray, none of those scenic approaches are affected here. So the only strategic issue with which the reporter needs to be concerned is Roy's Hill.
That's correct.
Fine. And I was going to refer to the reporter without going there to 21.9, which is the recommended landscape strategy. Actually, let's go through it very quickly, actually. The strategy is firstly to protect the landmark hills and their setting. Well, we're apart on that, clearly. Maintain the distinctive western threshold to Murray, not an issue. Stop me if you disagree. Maintain the rugged scenery and setting to more dramatic uplands in the Van Rennes area, not an issue for us here. Protect the special qualities of the coast, clearly not an issue. Ensure that any further development, larger typologies associated with the upland landscapes, we tick that box.
No. You need to read the text underneath the bold type, and particularly the point that's made about setting development well back into the upland interior.
All right, that's between us. I'll take that, accept it. We're apart on that. And ongoing review of, well...
Sorry, can I just go back?
Yes, of course.
I've just read the last sentence as well.
Oh dear.
Minimising cumulative impacts that could occur where different sizes and designs of turbines are cited and all that. So, yeah, so there's an aspect of that as well.
It is, and that's between us, that bullet point, I accept that. The last one, well, it's sort of between us, I'm not sure how far. Ongoing review of cumulative landscape and visual effects.
Cumulative effects, landscape and visual effects, are not a key aspect of the Council's objection.
No, thought not. But that's really helpful. So some points arise here. First of all, can I be clear that when you talk about sensitivity to development within landscape types, and then you talk about capacity, this assessment of sensitivity may well take account of views from outside the area. It does for Broad Valley farmlands, for example.
Yes.
You say it's, those Broad Valley farmlands, that the Spey Valley, are vulnerable to skyline development.
Yes, in the sensitivity assessment for each landscape character type, there's a criterion called landscape context. So it will look at the effects of a proposal on adjacent landscapes, and you need to do that with wind energy development because they're big structures.
No argument between us there. But when it comes to capacity, the capacity you assess is capacity for development in the area you're looking at.
It is.
Right, so that's the difference between
Yes.
sensitivity and capacity in that sense. When we talk about landscape capacity, I've got a bit of paper, APP8 we need to go to. This is the print from the SNH website. And I think the reporter will forgive one reference to the fact that you and I have discussed this issue before, but the issue is this really a capacity study? And you'll see that under the heading of sensitivity, susceptibility and capacity, is this not SNH recognising that although they intend to continue to use the term capacity study, it'll be clear via introductory links and other text that susceptibility will be a better description of the work that you're carrying out?
Yes, I did mention it's not guidance, but a new approach to landscape sensitivity assessment has just been issued, and this is SNH were party to that, and this is a response to that. Interestingly, under how to do it, there's guidance on commissioning landscape capacity studies and a review and guide to good practice study, which is interesting to note that my co-author on the study, Alison Grant, was also the author of that review and the toolkit, which is on SNH's website about commissioning landscape
I'm not being
capacity
rude, but
studies.
why would I find that interesting in the context of this inquiry?
Because I think in terms of the methodology that we've adopted for the study, the landscape capacity study in Moray, is therefore rigorous because we had the benefit of her having been involved in this review.
Okay, well, you're my witness, the witness I'm cross-examining, so forgive me if I
but you're
leave that
examining
to one
me
side.
on the capacity study.
Well, I think you're guessing where I'm going without necessarily getting it right at the moment.
Okay.
So let's go where I am going instead. You see what SNH say. My point is this, that you're still using, or you used in 2017, I don't know what you do now, the word capacity, and you assess capacity. You go beyond landscape sensitivity into capacity. And I think, doesn't that give rise to a real, pretty fundamental problem with this approach, that quite inevitably you stray into the territory of need and policy as soon as you mention capacity? It's not your job to do it.
I don't agree. And I think if you look at the heading of this, which is dated 2019, it's just been issued very recently, and SNH intend to continue using the term landscape capacity study, so they're still using it.
Well, do read, as you would say to me quite rightly, and you've said it already, do read on. It'll be clear that susceptibility would be a more correct description that reflects the terms of GLVIA 3. That is what SNH is saying.
2019, this was issued. This reflects most recent document detailing approach, new thinking on these studies. And I have been clear in saying that the Moray capacity study, the field work for that and the writing up was done in 2015, although it wasn't issued until 2017.
It's still current so far as this inquiry is concerned, so we have to deal with it. When it was written, it's in some ways immaterial. It's before us. We've got what SNH is now saying in 2019 about susceptibility rather than capacity. I'll drive back to my question, which is, you are straying into the territory of policy, because how much wind energy may need to be accommodated in any given area is primarily a function of the need case and therefore of policy, not what you may assess as a matter of landscape sensitivity.
Oh, I think we've had this before, haven't we, Mr. Trinick? Because it's about quotas, isn't it? And
So it's
defining about quotas and defining an extent of development or particular megawattage or something.
You can guess what I'm getting out if you want, or you could just answer the question. It's entirely up to you. I'll put the question again. I recommend you might just answer my question because it just goes off on one otherwise. You are straying into the territory of policy, your advice on capacity, because I suggest that how much of a particular form of development, here we're talking about wind, you may need, is a function of need and policy, not what you may advise upon as a matter of landscape sensitivity. Yours is simply an input into a much bigger overall picture.
I agree with that, but I don't agree that the guidance and the conclusions of the landscape capacity study do stray onto policy matters. It is a landscape and visual study. It makes it very clear. In the introductory sections of the report, it very clearly says it is just referring to landscape and visual sensitivities. It doesn't look at need. It doesn't look at suitability, wind speeds, any of those more technical aspects that need to be considered.
So perhaps we can agree that in terms of your conclusions about capacity, and I ask this because we're coming on to a policy hearing session later and we want to know how much weight to give to capacity advice in this document. Perhaps we can agree that your capacity study is one input into a much larger equation. The reporter should not use your capacity advice as any kind of be-all and end-all. It's an input into an overall planning balance.
Of course.
Thank you. And as I understand your general position, following on from that, because it goes further, if you go to your report at 6.3.
Inquiry report.
Yes, sorry, my apologies. I lost it. When I find my own copy, I'll let you know. I do need to find it. Yes, I will. At 6.3. Murray already accommodates a substantial number of large wind turbines, and with dwindling areas of less sensitive uplands remaining, the Council considers there are very limited opportunities for further development to be accommodated. So your position, as I understand it, is as we get more development in the landscape, more wind energy development of a particular typology, so I'll just keep it to the very large or large typology for the moment, landscape and visual sensitivity will increase and capacity will decrease.
I think that's a generalisation, but probably fair enough.
Sometimes generalisations work, and I think that's one case, meaning that it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it, that as we get more and more, so we can accommodate less and less. And I see a certain logic in that, but again, I come back to you straying into policy. If the need case, and if policy says, and others in this room may viscerally disagree with what I'm putting to you, I appreciate that we need a great deal more wind energy development onshore in Scotland. The fact that you may conclude in the landscape sensitivity or susceptibility or capacity study that there's no more room in Murray, it becomes a smaller and smaller input into the overall equation.
The capacity study and my conclusion isn't that there's no room left. The capacity study does say that there is scope for potential development in certain upland areas.
You worded my question as you have before. I said, if your position is that with more development, landscape sensitivity increases, landscape capacity decreases, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. There's going to be less and less capacity. But if government policy dictates there is a needs case for more and more onshore wind energy development, then in the planning balance, my suggestion is that your advice on capacity should attract less and less weight, frankly.
I can't answer that. I'm here as a landscape and visual witness. I'm giving my opinion on what the landscape and visual effects of this proposal will be.
Very well. Very well. If we look at page 15 of the LCS again, so I'm going to take just a pause of 2 minutes while I find my copy, because it's all marked up and I need it. find it, I buried it myself. It wasn't my witness's fault. It usually is, but not. He can apologise anyway. See page 15 of the LCS again.
Sorry, 15?
Page 15, yeah. This is the landscape capacity study. That's right. As I understand it, do correct me if I'm wrong, but what's being assessed here is sensitivity to new development. It could be an extension because cumulative impacts are an indicator of sensitivity, but otherwise it would be something like Clashgower or Rothas or Paul's Hill. It wouldn't be a repowering.
Yes, I think that's fair. Mm-hmm.
So my curiosity is how you then assess sensitivity to repowering, given that I guess that the fact of a wind farm having been there for 20 years might well affect perceptions of sensitivity.
Well, consideration of repowering was based on existing wind farms, obviously, and it was done as a separate exercise. It was requested in our brief. The steering group included SNH as well as the council, and we explored opportunities for repowering, obviously set out in Chapter 4 of the study. And in terms of that, we did the sample visualizations as I've described in my inquiry report, and we did a separate assessment looking at repowering based on those wind farms, and that involves sort of field survey work, looking at them from key viewpoints and assessing the fit in terms of different sized turbines.
So are you saying then that you didn't use the method of assessing sensitivity for the rest of the report when it came to repowering?
It was a different exercise because you've already got the wind farms there, so we were looking at it in terms of effects on key views. We also looked at much larger turbines within the sensitivity assessment for each landscape character type as well, and that's set out in the appendix report in the tables.
Yes, I see, I've got that indeed. But that appendix report, let's just go to it very briefly. It goes to say, it's not paginated. Go to landscape character type 11. That covers, when you go to very large-scale typology assessment, 130 metres, high, medium sensitivity. This is for our LCT, but that would be not repowering, would it? That's for other types of development?
It's principally for other types of development. It's for new developments.
It's for new development, isn't it? And because the findings we've already explored on page 77 for open rolling uplands don't mention repowering. So that's a separate exercise. In terms of... Sorry.
Yes, it is a separate exercise, yes.
In terms of repowering, would I be right that it's... Chapter 4 is a bit of a standalone, isn't it?
It is, yes.
You can't really use the sensitivity ascribed in the rest of the report and use it for the purpose of Chapter 4.
It is more specific, Chapter 4, what's set out, the exercise that was undertaken, because it is focusing on specific developments and how they would look and how they would fit with the landscape if they were increased in size.
That's fine. So this is not critical. It was a road testing of concepts at 130 and 150 using existing turbine permissions and evaluating those developments by reference to sample viewpoints.
Yes.
Sums it up.
Yes.
Right, good, thank you. inquiry report at 28 and 29. I reckon another 10, 15 minutes will see us through to a convenient moment. And after that, so people know, we're more than halfway through. At 2.8 and 2.9, you talk about the methodology used for exploring repowering, and we can take that as read. I'm intrigued by one thing here. If you get out Appendix E to the landscape capacity study, I've got 3 documents in front of you. Let's go to that one first. So Appendix E are the repowering appraisal, the ZTVs and visualizations, okay? Mm-hmm. We've got those. Also, would you get out ES figure 6.2? So you do need the, yeah, you will need the ES for that. Spanish as well. No, it hasn't. There it is. See, I'm just finding my own document. 6.2. That is the Paul's Hill ZTV. The third document you need is the extracted figure 13.4 from CD1.8 technical appendix, which I deliberately got at separately for this exercise. So you should have three things in front of you. Your Appendix E to the landscape capacity study, figure 6.2 in the ES, and figure 13.4. If you look at, turn over to the ZTV for Paul's Hill at 150 metres in the LCS, the comparison ZTV, you've got 3 things there, haven't we? We got that, sir? Mm-hmm. We have there the existing visibility of Paul's Hill wind farm, or potential visibility. Let's take in all cases potential. Orange at 150 and 200 is red. So what I'm interested in are the green and the orange. And we can see the projections of theoretical visibility at 150 metres. If we then go to Paul's Hill 2 ZTV, figure 6.2, I don't think it's stretching a point to say that the theoretical visibility of Paul's Hill 2 in almost every direction is considerably less than that envisaged at 150 metres for Paul's Hill 1 on the existing turbine positions. Don't worry about where the question goes, it's just a factual question. I'd be right, wouldn't I?
It was substantial. I mean, there is a difference. You can see the difference. But I think the problem with looking at...
No. We'll go my questions, if you don't mind, first. There's a factual question. You will get a chance to explain, but I want to go through the facts first, so
Okay.
please stick with them. If you go off to the west of Paul's Hill 1 and 2, to the, is it 939 and 941? 939, I think, goes up from Dava up towards Forest.
Mhm.
You can see there to the east of that road, there is a substantial area of projected potential visibility for Paul's Hill at 150 metres, which does not appear for Paul's Hill 2. Factually, am I right?
Can you repeat that again? Did you say substantial?
Yes, I did. If you go to...
And we're talking about the red, aren't we? Or we're talking about
I
the
think
orange.
you know what we're talking about.
We're talking
Let's
about the
do-
orange.
You know what we're talking about. We're looking coming up the road from Davamore,
Yeah.
across Davamore, Candewey to the left, Knockerbrae to the right, going up towards Forest on that road. East of that road, I'd say we're talking about 150 metres, so that's green and orange. There's a substantial area of potential visibility of that modelled development, which we don't see on the Paul's Hill 2 ZTV, do we?
That's correct, but you were wrong in saying that I deliberately was ignoring what you had pointed out, because I was certain that you had said east of the Dallas Road. I wasn't over towards Dava, but I can see that there is an area of orange in that area. Just it's more and more that sort of area. Yes.
Yeah. And then we go to the Spey Valley, southwest of Adby, indeed just southeast of Adby and south as well. There's an area of green visibility projected for Paul's Hill at 150 metres, which we don't see for Paul's Hill 2 as proposed. Correct?
You're meaning orange, not green, aren't you?
No, I don't know. I mean green as well, south
But
of that
green
road.
is the existing.
Well, it may well be existing. But don't forget, we're looking at different turbine positions here. You're looking at Paul's Hill 1 turbine positions,
Okay.
and we're looking at a comparison of Paul's Hill 2. So there's visibility there. There's also some orange down towards Grantham.
I thought your point was about the 150-metre turbines, because your point's about increased visibility in comparison with Paul's Hill 2, is it not?
Well, you're second-guessing me. Let's take it question by question, shall we? You see the green area to the south there, which is larger than for Paul's Hill 2, south of that road, and we see some orange for 150 metres down by Grantham. It doesn't appear for Paul's Hill 2, am I correct?
Yes.
Right. Then if we go to figure 13.4, take it, you can put to one side figure 6.2, but keep out your LCS ZTV. Here we have a cumulative visibility zone for Paul's Hill 1 and 2. So Paul's Hill as existing, of course, not at 150 metres. Now, either something's gone wrong with your ZTV in the area of Nethy Bridge down that way. I don't know what's happened. But for the green, in other words, because the green is not the same as for our ZTV, I don't know quite what's happened. I'm making that point for you rather than against you, so I don't embellish the point I'm putting to you. But I ask you to accept as generality that actually Paul's Hill repowering at 150, that's green and orange. The theoretical visibility of that development is considerably greater than the cumulative zone of Paul's Hill 1 as is and Paul's Hill 2. You can see that.
I wouldn't say considerably. I would agree that it is greater. But the point I was going to make is that you cannot just compare a theoretical visibility, because it does depend on viewpoints and the effect on those views in the field, and that is mentioned very clearly in section 4 of the landscape capacity study.
Yes, but the ZTV is a starting point. Don't worry, we'll come on to the visualisation, which you've used for the LCS as well. So we're not going to leave that out. But looking purely at the ZTB map, a reporter can note, can't he, that a development which the LCS concludes may have some legs, I don't say it does have legs, it may have some potential within the open rolling uplands. That's Paul's Hill, repowered at 150 metres, has considerably greater, in my suggestion to you, considerably greater potential visibility than Paul's Hill 1 as is and Paul's Hill 2 together.
Yes, but I will repeat, it's only one aspect. Visibility, extent of visibility is only one factor that needs to be taken into account. It's the actual effect on views in the field that need to be considered.
Well, that's a very good cue. Let's turn to the view in the field. Go to viewpoint 1 in the AI, please. I think if we go to figure 7A1, i.e. the wireline, that'll do us. So here we have Paul's Hill 1 and 2 together, viewed from the Cornwall Distillery. And then looking at your repowering modelling exercise, if we turn on a few pages from the ZTB, you'll find viewpoint 1, A95, Tormore, Paul's Hill at 150 metres. Now, I'm not saying the viewpoints are in precisely the same location. I don't know, I don't care. It's broadly the same view. My suggestion to you is that acknowledging your viewpoint, I've got it may be at A3 for all I know, I've got A4, acknowledging the poorer quality of a photocopy representation, all the usual caveats apply. Nevertheless, I'd suggest to you that Paul's Hill 1 repowered exerts a much greater visual influence on the viewer at that viewpoint than Paul's Hill 1 as is and Paul's Hill 2 together.
I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. I think these visualizations, and it is quite clear in the landscape capacity study that when we were doing the assessment, the turbines are located on the same positions as the existing, so there is a little bit more congestion in that they are smaller turbines. The locations are for smaller turbines, and they may well be more spaced out. In a landscape capacity study, we have a limited budget, limited amount of time. It's not like doing an assessment of a specific proposal, wind farm proposal. And there wasn't, there wasn't scope to revise the spacings of the turbines within our remit and the brief that we had. But that is very clearly stated that, any repowering proposal in that location would be redesigned. So I don't think you can compare the two in terms of Paul's Hill 1 and 2 together and this viewpoint 1 showing the 150-metre high turbines, because this hasn't had a design exercise done on it. It's indicative, it's for use in the field. They were printed out at standard sizes in the field, but for economy they had to be printed at A4 in the report. In terms of viewpoint 1, looking at Paul's Hill 1 and Paul's Hill 2 together, I'm quite clear in my inquiry report that I do not think that that is satisfactory. It is not good design. And actually just a bit further up that road
I tell you what, I've been very patient, but I'm going to stop because you've gone well beyond my question. We know what your evidence is on Paul's Hill 2. Okay. It's in your report. We know what you say about viewpoint 1 there. I want to stick to the question I asked you, which is coming back to the repowering exercise in Chapter 4 of the LCS. My suggestion is that whatever you may say about redesign, and I will go further, there may well be fewer turbines because the higher the greater capacity, you may not need so many as Paul's Hill 1. You know, I'll take all of that. My suggestion is nevertheless, that if you're going to put 150-metre high turbines on Paul's Hill, you're inevitably going to impact on the view from viewpoint 1 and indeed other viewpoints much more than you would simply by adding Paul's Hill 2 to Paul's Hill 1.
I think it does recognise in the report in section 4 that there would be significant impacts or there would be an effect, and it highlights where the effects would be.
Yep, that's fine. Nevertheless, that report concludes on the basis of the exercise you've carried out, using the tools to hand, and please don't look for sympathy for lack of resources. This is the report that's being produced, is before the inquiry is being used against us. You have concluded, on the basis of that exercise, there is greatest opportunity for repowering within this very LCT. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes.
Thank you. So that's a convenient moment.
Okay, we will adjourn until 10 o'clock tomorrow, and thank you very much.